allow me to invite the last person today. It's called Arthur Mamvura. This is Director, Procurement Africa, Diago. This guy is based in Nigeria. He's currently a director, a procurement director at Guinness, Nigeria. Arthur brings experience from previous roles at Unilever, Nigeria, Unilever East and Southern Africa, Unilever Africa, Middle East, and Turkey. Arthur holds a bachelor's degree of Bachelor of Science at the University of Zimbabwe, with rubber skills set that include supply chain in FMCG, supply chain management, demand planning, and more and more. Welcome, Arthur. Come and speak. Give us that experience. Can you clap for him? Welcome.
Thank you very much. I think that's my CV from the internet. I couldn't recognize it, but that's me. Habari zenu. So, really exciting afternoon. I think it's a very difficult act to go after Isaac. I think CEO, next time can we turn the program around? Very passionate. And also before that, the DG, it felt like, he just took the presentation off my computer. So really excited with all the experience sharing. The last time we met in Naivasha, I think it was the same experience, but I think this is, a little bit more deeper, a little bit more personal. I also like putting the mirror in our faces and really confronting this thing. So you heard from my CV, I actually look after procurement for Diageo in Africa. I also look after agriculture, so in my heart of hearts, I'm a farmer. The other thing is that I've spent quite a lot of time in Africa. You had a lot of Nigeria featuring on this CV. I did spend 14 years in that country. And if you think you've got problems here, I think you need to think again. Yeah. But this is Africa, right? We are one people, yeah. I think the most important thing here is that the conversation is happening now. Yeah. The courage, the vulnerability, putting the mirror, and yeah. So that's one. Two, I think most of the speakers, my perception was that there's a kind of a feeling that private sector, public sector are very different. And I want to debunk that myth today. They are not. In fact, they are more similar than different, especially when it comes to procurement. When I listen to every presentation today, even the language, right? At Diageo, we talk about doing business the right way from grain to glass. Yeah? There was, I think also the DG spoke about it, right? Doing business the right way. So the language, the challenges, the direction of travel, we are in the same boat. So therefore we need to continue to have this conversation so that we can share best practices, we can share experiences, and also we can eliminate the duplication of effort in trying to solve issues within procurement. Yeah. In terms of the thing which I didn't quite hear much today, I would say 99% of the stuff, you could find them in my presentation, yeah, with my team, with my bosses, in my business. However, the private sector motivation, is about profit, is about shareholder return. But today, if you do not deal with societal issues, the profit will not come because nobody will buy, right? You'll become irrelevant, yeah? Government looks at, the public sector looks at, societal interests, long-term goals. And also the government is a big machine, right? So if you want to turn it, it takes time, right? It's not like a small aircraft, it's a big engine. So some of the challenges you face, I can understand them, I can relate to them. when it comes to the private sector, right, our biggest advantage, right, is that we go for profit or we die. Yeah? And therefore, you have to move fast, you have to be agile, and you have to be all those things that you need to do to be profitable. Now the thing is that if I look at some of the stuff that I just heard, and I just want to play it back to you in terms of how the private sector deals with some of these things, right? From a procurement perspective, right, I have a team of 100 people spread over the continent, right? So all the issues that we talk about here, whether it's corruption, whether it's fraud, whether it's procuring materials in the time they are needed, I mean, these are daily issues for all of us, right? So we are in the same game. Now, the issue for us is that there is the political will in the business is there, and I think the DG mentioned this, right? There is the political will. So procurement is sacrosanct. You cannot make a decision on a procurement issue. Doesn't matter whether you are chairman of this region or CEO of this company. You cannot. It's just a breach. So procurement is left in the hands of the procurement practitioners. But then that requires us to behave and act in a certain way. So for instance, we are gatekeepers, which means whatever happens in the business, whatever goes wrong, from a procurement perspective, we have allowed it. Because we actually have the mandate to keep the gate and hold the tension. So therefore, if somebody comes and say, do this, do that, if you do it, it's because you want to. Yeah? So that's really the way we look at it, right? I'm not saying that things don't happen, things do happen, right? However, they do happen because you want it to happen. So some of the challenges I was hearing, wouldn't happen, right? Because there are so many avenues to deal with this. Either a speak up, I'm sure I'm sure this also exists in the public sector. Speak up way anonymously, you can go and report things and investigations can happen. But also every case of non-compliance is well investigated, well documented, and driven to completion. So some of those things will not happen. So there is a climate within the business that allows us as procurement to do our job. However, the challenge we face is one of leaving money on the table. Yeah? In other words, have you actually done a good job for the business, or you have left money on the table? Yeah? So that's the challenge we face. And my guidance to my team is always, if you are a chef and your job is in the kitchen, you cannot be afraid of the heat, because that's the nature of the role. So half the time we are under pressure to really confirm that this deal is smart, it makes sense, it has delivered value for the business. Of course, it's got to be done compliantly, and those processes do exist with the checks and the balances. So therefore, from a process perspective, I think we've got a fairly robust process, which can be executed at pace if needed. So for instance, one of the things we thrive on is innovation, your ability to introduce new products into the market much faster. And that sometimes can actually lead you to take very different decisions. But as long as there is a way to take the decision, so for instance, we are actually supposed to award tenders, right, to the cheapest, but not necessarily using that criteria only. So every project has got its own criteria, right? There can be 5. It can be cheap, it can be experience with similar projects, it can be technical expertise, etc., etc. And all of these criteria carry a weighting, yeah? And depending on the project, sometimes cost competitiveness can be huge, sometimes safety can be big, right? So when you look at this criteria, sometimes you could end up awarding a tender to somebody who is necessarily not the cheapest, because on balance, it is a much better decision for the business. But of course, all those decisions are gated there is a process, you have to justify, you have to do, etc., etc., etc. The other thing is that all procurement, by default, should be carried out under e-auction. So therefore, if you are not going to implement e-auction for your sourcing project, there has to be special approvals given. So when I talk about a sort of context in which we can actually do our job, the context actually does exist, right? So it's really about us as procurement people now, basically, holding the tension and doing our job. Now, from a public-private, collaboration, working together kind of thing, I think the kind of things which really come to my mind are that we need to reduce the burden of compliance. So I'm not saying that we should reduce our needs to comply, but the process to comply, the burden of compliance needs to be reduced. So one of the things we are doing in the private sector, right, and I think some of you guys know this, is that when it comes to ethical audits, when we check for human rights and environmental practices, health and safety, etc., etc., we have a lot of other big multinationals who are using the same suppliers as us. Yeah. So we are now at a point where, if we go to, let me say, Unilever, the one I've worked for before, we can actually accept Unilever's outcome of the audit of a supplier, and therefore reduce the burden of compliance for that supplier. So there are things I think that can be done to reduce the burden of compliance, particularly when it comes to SMEs, as well as diverse suppliers, women-owned businesses, youth-owned, businesses owned by the previously socially or economically disadvantaged groups. So we think there is a benefit there. A lot of these are stimulants for innovation, and therefore, this could be the next successful incubator. So I think that's one. The second one, I think, is that forums like this one, I think, should really be attended by 50-50, Mr. Chairman, private, public sector. Because we actually interact in every way. I mean, I think our business deals with all the agencies here, with all the government bodies here. So therefore, I think it is also important that we work together to share challenges, expectations, and therefore we can improve the way we work and share solutions as well. Now, coming to the role of procurement in the organization, and I think the DG said it all. So I don't think I should have come here. I should have just copy pasted his presentation. By the way, there's something around earning a seat at the table, and this is one of the challenges we do face. In procurement, we do buy a lot of things. Some things that we never bought at all in our lives, but because we are procurement, we need these things for the business. So the way we earn at the seat at the table is actually to contribute significantly to the goals of the business. Yeah, I think the point was made here to say you really need to be commercially astute. Otherwise, you just become the errand boy and girl. Go and get me that, here it is. Go and get me that, here it is. We're really trying to push the envelope a little bit into starting to question, why should we buy it? Why should we buy it? Why can't you do that? Why can't we change the specification? This is too expensive. So therefore, procurement is now a valuable business partner, contributing to top line, to bottom line, and to cash. Today, all the GMs in Africa, they know that they need to give me airtime, because they've now realized that we need the partnership of procurement to actually deliver. Yeah, but also it's also about our procurement teams going into these areas and actually delivering value, and not just give me that, give me this, give me this, give me that. And that way, we start to get respect, and we start to get a seat at the table. Otherwise, we'll be relegated to the fringes, yeah? Simply because, of course, in most areas, we don't report to the CEO, we report to the finance, right? So therefore, we might end up being there, but our influence and ability to change the fortunes of whatever we do is really big. I think the other thing for me, from a public point of view, to think about is about an entrepreneurial mindset. Government, by its nature, is bureaucratic. It is what it is, right? It's big, it's complex, it's dealing with, the needs of millions, and therefore, it's not an easy task, and therefore it tends to be slow. And therefore, there is need to really, find those innovative ways to improve collaboration between the two. I don't think there's any business that would say, I don't want to comply with government policy. Yeah. So I think making it easy for businesses to comply could help improve compliance, for instance. But also, forums like these, specific on specific issues, specific industries, will help as well. I can also give an example on sustainability. So we did go into a new area. As Diageo, we did commit to decarbonization of our breweries by the end of this financial year. And we've really made progress there. So this is enabled by the use of biomass, which is predominantly agricultural residues, macadamia nut shells, wood, and all those kind of things. So this was a thing we went in for the first time, didn't know what biomass was. We brought in the 2 boilers, they were to be run using biomass, and therefore stop the use of HFO and all those fossil fuels. We have been on this now for 2 years. Yeah, it is one project where I think we probably should be putting a case study together, collaborating with the government agencies, but also getting a good idea of legislation, where it is going, what we should invest in, what we should not invest in. Because the other thing that the private sector requires is actually predictability of government policy, right? Because you are seeking in capital investment, which you need a return on. So therefore, if you bring in biomass boilers, you don't want the legislation to change next year into something else. Yeah. So I think forums like these can bring us together. We can understand more how the public sector works, and therefore how best can we collaborate. There are many areas where we are collaborating very, very successfully with the public sector, particularly in agriculture. It's a big benefit for both us as well as the masses. And of course, government is an enabler here. It also plays a very specific role through the various bodies that we work on. So it is very possible to really work in a very collaborative way. And also I think the private sector can gain more by investing in those areas which basically align with public policy. We have seen that many times. We have got what we call dial-up behaviors in the business. These are behaviors which everybody is bound to, whether it's the CEO or the guy on the shop floor. We talk of things like act decisively, which means move with pace, experiment and learn, and also be externally curious. So these are behaviors. Now, when you reconcile these behaviors with governance, you might say, well, there's a problem here, because how can I act with speed when I have to comply with these steps? But the point we make is, move with speed, but step by step. Yeah. So I could go on and on. But, you know, I think the differences are far less. Okay, okay. The differences are far less than the similarities. Yeah. The last thing I want to mention is that, you know, one of the things we are measured on, which I didn't hear much of, is productivity. So when we set a budget, we also set a savings target for the procurement people. So we set a budget, let's say 100 million Kenyan shillings. We need to save 5 to 10% of that as a target for every procurement person in Diageo. So what that does is that, you know, it makes us relevant because everything we save actually goes to the P&L and therefore deliver more profits for the business. But it also helps us also ensure that we are not leaving money on the table and that we are, you know, we are doing our job right. So I could go on and on, but you know, that's all I wanted to share with you today. You know, I've learned a lot. I hope we can keep in touch, and really happy to see some of the guys from the agencies we work with. So hopefully we'll be talking together in, you know, in the future. Asante sana.